Before generals, before empires, before humanity even got good at writing things down, there was a conqueror that put them all to shame. It wasn't a charismatic leader or a brilliant tactician. It was a microscopic particle with a knack for turning people into pustule-covered disasters. Meet variola major, the virus that causes smallpox. This little monster didn't care about supply lines, troop morale, or political alliances. For most of human history, it was the single most powerful entity on the planet, and it achieved this status by being exceptionally good at one thing: killing us. Eurasia and Africa had the distinct misfortune of living with smallpox for thousands of years. It was like the world's worst roommate. We have evidence of it on the mummy of Pharaoh Ramesses V, who died in 1157 BCE, looking less than regal. For centuries, it was just a fact of life. You either got it and survived with some fetching scars, or you died. The Antonine Plague, which probably was smallpox, ripped through the Roman Empire in the 2nd century, killing up to 5 million people. It was a background noise of pure horror that everyone just got used to. Humanity's first attempts to fight back were, characteristically, insane. The practice of variolation involved taking pus from a sick person's sores and introducing it into a healthy person. Yes, the official medical advice was a little bit of plague should do the trick. Sometimes it gave you a mild case and immunity. Other times, it just gave you a full-blown, lethal case of smallpox. It was a terrible, desperate gamble, championed in Europe by people like Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, who saw it in the Ottoman Empire and thought, well, it's better than nothing. Across the Atlantic, entire civilizations were living in blissful ignorance. The Americas were a massive, isolated laboratory of human development. The Aztec, Maya, and Inca empires built sprawling cities, developed complex calendars, and managed populations of millions. Tenochtitlan was bigger and cleaner than most European capitals. But their immune systems had never met anything like measles, influenza, or, most importantly, smallpox. They were about to get a crash course in old-world diseases, and there was no grading on a curve. When Hern Cortés arrived in Mexico in 1519 with a few hundred men, the Aztecs had every reason to be unimpressed. He was ridiculously outnumbered. But he had a secret weapon, and it wasn't his steel swords or his terrible beard. In 1520, a single infected African slave landed with a Spanish reinforcement party. That one person was more effective than Cort's entire army. The virus moved silently through the population, a biological Trojan horse that couldn't be stopped because nobody even knew it was there. The siege of Tenochtitlan should have been a failure for the Spanish. The Aztecs fought them to a standstill and even drove them out of the city during the Noche Triste. But then, smallpox went to work. It swept through the city with an unbelievable ferocity. It killed warriors, priests, and even the new Aztec emperor. Within months, some estimates suggest 40% of the city's population was dead. The survivors were too weak to fight, farm, or even get water. Cortés didn't conquer an army. He just walked in after a biological apocalypse had done the heavy lifting. If Cortés got lucky, Francisco Pizarro hit the historical jackpot. He planned to conquer the Inca Empire, the largest in the Americas. The problem was, smallpox got there first. The disease traveled overland faster than the Spanish could. It killed the Incan emperor, Huayna Capac, and his chosen heir around 1527, years before Pizarro even showed up in force. This immediately triggered a massive civil war between two of the emperor's sons, Atahualpa and Huáscar. Pizarro arrived to find a powerful empire exhausted and fractured by years of brutal internal conflict. He didn't topple a pyramid, he kicked a pile of rubble. The story repeated itself up north. The Native American populations of the eastern seaboard were devastated by waves of disease. The Massachusetts and Wampanoag people, for instance, suffered a 90% mortality rate from epidemics between 1616 and 1619. When the Pilgrims arrived in 1620, they found cleared fields and abandoned villages, which they immediately interpreted as a sign of God's divine providence. It's a fantastic way to frame a tragedy. Someone else's apocalypse is just your convenient real estate opportunity. Humans are great at that. Sometimes the spread wasn't accidental. The most famous or infamous example comes from 1763 during Pontiac's War. The British commander, Geoffrey Amherst, was tired of the siege at Fort Pitt. In his letters, he mused about sending smallpox to the surrounding tribes. His subordinate confirmed they did just that, giving 2 blankets and a handkerchief from the smallpox hospital to Native American emissaries as a gift. We can't be sure how effective this one act was, but the intent is crystal clear. It's one of history's grimmest moments, where the invisible weapon was finally aimed on purpose. This wasn't just an American story. Smallpox was an equal opportunity destroyer. When the British First Fleet arrived in Australia in 1788, it brought more than just convicts. An outbreak in 1789 devastated the local Aboriginal populations around Sydney, who had no immunity whatsoever. Some accounts describe seeing shores littered with bodies. It also marched across Siberia, decimating Tungus peoples by up to 80% in the 1650s. Everywhere humanity went, the virus was either already there or hitched a ride, ready to introduce itself. After millennia of getting absolutely hammered, humanity finally had a moment of clarity. It came from an English country doctor named Edward Jenner. He noticed a piece of local folklore. Milkmaids who got a mild disease called cowpox from cows didn't seem to get smallpox. So he ran an experiment in 1796 that would get him arrested today. He took pus from a milkmaid's cowpox sore and put it into a healthy 8-year-old boy. Later, he exposed the boy to smallpox, and nothing happened. It worked. The age of vaccination, from vacca, the Latin for cow, had begun. Of course, a solution doesn't mean the problem just vanishes. For the next century and a half, vaccination was a slow, messy process. People were, understandably, a little weirded out by the idea of being injected with cow disease. Anti-vaccination leagues popped up almost immediately, arguing it was unnatural and unholy. Meanwhile, the virus kept on killing. As late as the 20th century, smallpox was still responsible for an estimated 300 to 500 million deaths. Having the cure and getting everyone to take it are two very different problems. In 1967, the World Health Organization decided to get serious. It launched the Intensified Eradication Program. This was humanity's final boss battle against its oldest enemy. It was a logistical nightmare involving Cold War cooperation between the USA and the Soviet Union, which is a miracle in itself. The key weapon wasn't just the vaccine, but a simple piece of tech, the bifurcated needle. It was a tiny, forked needle that held exactly one dose of reconstituted vaccine and was easy to use. This simple innovation made mass vaccination possible on a global scale. The program worked. Cases plummeted. The last naturally occurring case of the deadly variola major was in 1975. The last case of any kind was a hospital cook in Somalia named Ali Mau Malan in 1977, who caught the milder variola minor. He survived. On May 8, 1980, the WHO officially declared the world free of smallpox. It is the only human disease to ever be completely eradicated. We won! And now, the only known live samples exist in two high-security freezers, one near Atlanta and one in Siberia, which is a perfectly comforting thought and not at all the premise for a future disaster movie. Even in death, smallpox left its mark. Its reign of terror may have permanently altered our DNA. There's a genetic mutation, CCR5 delta 32, that makes some people highly resistant to HIV. It's most common in Europeans. One leading theory is that this mutation wasn't selected for by HIV, but by a plague that killed huge numbers of Europeans for centuries. A plague like smallpox. Our ancestors' brutal fight for survival against one virus may have accidentally given some of us a defense against a future one. It's a chilling reminder that history is not just in our books, it's in our blood. So smallpox went from being the planet's apex predator to a historical footnote locked in a freezer. It shaped nations, cleared continents, and decided the outcome of wars more effectively than any human ever did. It's a humbling story about a mindless particle of genetic material that brought empires to their knees. The story proves that the most powerful forces in history are often the ones you can't see. It's also a pretty good argument for washing your hands and listening to doctors. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!